Okay, so my theme for this year was 2020, a time for reflection, renewal, and regeneration. And so the reason that we chose this theme was as we were getting into 2020, there was a lot happening in the country. And so when one thinks about 2020, one immediately has this 2020 vision at the back of your mind and a clear vision for what the future was, or what the future is going to be. And we thought it would be, because of what was happening in the country, it would be an appropriate time, firstly to reflect on what has happened. I think, coming in through 2019, coming into 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty around what was going on in the country. I believe that we were looking very deeply at what had happened over the last 10 years, the so-called lost decade. And I also feel that there was this process, or this period of catharsis and deep introspection as to what was actually happening. But also through that process, there was this feeling of that there was some sort of renewal that was happening in the country as well. There was some hope building up. There was anticipation of change that was coming. And we were working towards some sort of renewal and regeneration. And in terms of regeneration, what I mean is that there is this combined energy in the country to try and fix some of the things that have gone wrong, and to try and charter a new way forward. Certainly from a CESA perspective, we want to be part of that regeneration process. I think we've got a lot to offer in terms of solutions, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And we want to engage with the decision makers, with government, to put some of these solutions forward and share some of our ideas. And also, while we do that, there's a lot of initiatives that have been going on for a number of years now, and I will touch on some of those later. But we certainly don't want to lose the impetus that we had with those initiatives. So this was the reason that we chose this theme for this year. And then we were in this planning and this whole process, and obviously COVID-19 struck. And whilst I don't want to go into all of the detail, because we are all very familiar with what's happened and the impact that it has, but really we've been thrown into a crisis situation across the world and certainly in the country. So it's a crisis facing humanity itself, facing our businesses, facing our employees, us as business owners. And I think that the bigger thing for me was that it really re-exposed the inequalities that exist around the world, and particularly in our country. And it also, when we saw, and we knew these things, this is a reality that we've been living with for a number of years. When we look at some of our informal settlements, the conditions that our people live under, there was no opportunity for them to social distance. When you've got 5 or 6 people living in a small one-room sort of shack sometimes, or often, there's no room to social distance. A lot of these places don't have access to basic services. You couldn't be washing your hands regularly if you don't have access to clean water. And I think it just highlighted the importance and the value that engineering brings to society, and the focus that needs to be placed on engineering and how it can address a lot of these problems. And finally, I just want to touch on what our Minister of Finance said last week. We're facing this debt hippo that's eating into our finances, it's eating into our future, and it's eating into our children's inheritance. So bearing all this in mind, I want to start focusing on what some of the proposals that we are putting forward through CESA, and how we're participating in the bigger discussion that's happening in the country as to how we get out of this. Firstly, I just on the reflection point, I want to go through briefly some of the issues that we've been facing over the last couple of years. Again, I think that they are not new issues. We are all familiar with them, but I just want us to have that background on where we've been coming from. So I'm going to go through them very briefly. A lot of the problems that we've been facing. So the first one that's top of mind at the moment is the whole state capture issue and the corruption that goes along with it. And whilst the amount of money that was laundered and that was stolen is a huge issue, the bigger issue for me is the impact that it has had on our state institutions in terms of the corruption of officials that are working in the state departments, the lack of processes, demise of some of the systems, the lack of accountability. And that is going to be a huge problem for us to fix as we go forward. I think it's also important for me to point out that this is certainly not the case with all of our state institutions. There are certainly pockets of excellence and certainly pockets within government that are doing excellent work. And thank you to our speaker from SANRAL. I think SANRAL is one of those state institutions that we look to in terms of leadership, in terms of infrastructure delivery. So some of the statements I'm making are general and it doesn't apply to all of our institutions. I think the second one was around our audit outcomes. And this has also been an ongoing problem for a number of years now. We have two problems here. Firstly, we or the government, municipalities, provincial departments, firstly, they don't spend the budgets that are available to them. So there's year on year, we hear about large amounts of money that are not being spent because of inefficiencies in the system. And obviously that has a huge impact on the services that are delivered to our communities. And it also has an impact on us as practitioners in the built environment space, on our contractors in the built environment space. And then on the other hand, when we do spend money, we don't spend it effectively and efficiently. So we have poor audit outcomes on the money that we do spend. We also have what I call unintended consequences of the audit process. And I think SANRAL is one of those organizations that can attest to this, is that the regulations have become so constrained, and there was reason to constrain these regulations and put in all of the checks and balances, but it's possibly got so constrained that a lot of our institutions or the officials in these institutions don't feel empowered to make decisions because of these issues of being held personally liable if something goes wrong. So there's very little room for officials to maneuver. So what they do is they err on the side of caution, and generally this means that decisions are not made. As I say, we understand why officials are placed in these positions and why they are reluctant to make decisions, but the impact that it has on service delivery is something that needs to be unpacked and understood. Leighton also mentioned the poor communications, firstly within government. You don't get the three spheres of government speaking effectively and efficiently to each other, and the SOEs and our government, our local government departments, provincial government departments, and they are at the forefront or on the coalface of service delivery. And then on the other side, you have National Treasury, you have the Auditor General's department, or the Auditor General. There seems to be a lack of effective and efficient communication. So there's misinterpretation, different interpretation of regulations, of how, especially in the procurement space, on how procurement should actually be done. And again, I want to use SANRAL as the example. We've had this. There was different interpretations of how regulation should be implemented, and we had these huge delays with some of the projects that SANRAL was busy with and that couldn't award. We have the issue of changing regulations, and by this I mean there's a constant changing of regulations. A couple of years ago, we had the standard for infrastructure procurement and delivery management, the SIPDM. We went through an entire process, and the SIPDM. It was an excellent piece of regulations in that it separated infrastructure procurement from general procurement. It had a clear framework on how procurement of how infrastructure should be procured, on how infrastructure should be implemented. We were at the point of implementation, and then it was changed to the FITPM. And then recently, earlier this year, the public procurement bill was sent out for comment. And if any of you read through the bill and provided comment on that bill, you would have seen that it was referring back to the SIPDM and the standard for infrastructure procurement. So there's this continuous changing of regulations, and I'm sure our officials can't keep up with the changes that are happening. And then us from the private sector and from industry, we also can't keep up with the changing regulations. So, this also leads to a reluctance in decision making and a paralysis in terms of how we go forward with projects. We all know, in terms of of our construction companies, especially the problems that they find themselves in, from the large listed companies all the way down to medium and the smaller companies. Everybody's struggling because of a number of these issues that I've spoken about, but primarily because there isn't a project pipeline that companies, the private sector, can gear up to know that there is this pipeline of projects that are coming, and how do we gear up to those projects. Associated with that is the infrastructure value chain. So it's the material suppliers, subcontractors, all of us in the built environment space. We are all being affected by this, by the problems that are besetting this industry. And so the entire value chain is under pressure at the moment. And finally, as Leighton has touched on as well, the construction mafia, the havoc that they have wreaked on our sites. So the projects that were actually in implementation, a lot of those projects have been affected and have been stopped. So there are a number of other challenges. Just as a background, this is the history that we're coming from over the past couple of years. Also, just want to reflect on the CESA infrastructure report card. Many of you are familiar with this. I think what was very crucial to see that, so the report card has been produced on 3 occasions in 2006, 2011, and 2017. But in fact, from 2006 to 2011, there was an upward trend in the overall condition of our infrastructure. And in 2011, it was sitting at a C-, which is defined in the report card as being satisfactory. But since then, from 2011 to 2017, when the report card was updated, it's now sitting at a D+, which is defined in the report card as being at risk of failure. And we see this with the infrastructure, that when we look around, a lot of our infrastructure is not in good shape. Again, SANDRAL is one of the organizations where they spend a lot of money on maintenance. So their infrastructure is in a lot better position. But if you look around our water treatment works, our sewage treatment works, and especially in the municipalities, and if you look now from 2017 to 2020, 2021, you will see that downward trend with the condition of our infrastructure. We know about the ratings downgrade and the impact that that's going to have on the state's ability to fund infrastructure development, or I say the inability to fund infrastructure development, and the constraints that are being placed on the system. So we'll pick up on that later, on some of the solutions that might be available. I think we all know there's been a general lack of confidence in the economy, in our sector as well. Private sector has assisted somewhat in terms of the development and the infrastructure that they have been building, but generally that there's low levels of investment in infrastructure. And if one looks at this graph that plots investment in infrastructure, you'll see over the last couple of years a downward trend. This was 2018. If you're sitting at about 4% of GDP that was invested in infrastructure, and that trend is certainly going down. And then also, if we looked at gross fixed capital formation, so actual infrastructure that was built, hard infrastructure, investment in plant and equipment, we saw this huge drive towards 2010. Was this explosion in works that we were doing. But since 2010, you can see that the trajectory is pretty flat, and it's been sitting in the doldrums. Whilst the picture is very dire and it's quite negative over the last couple of years, I think there have been a few positive trends, and one of it is with regard to broad-based empowerment. We have seen a large number of opportunities for especially the smaller firms. And if we look at, we've been tracking this as CESA now within our membership, how the black ownership and black woman ownership has been changing. We've done that in 2019 and now in 2020. So these numbers are based on the 2020 figures that we have. And we see that 65% of CESA member firms are now majority black owned. 10% of those have woman ownership greater than 10%. 10%, yeah. And on a broad-based level, we see 66% of our firms are now qualifying as level 1 and level 2 companies. So there's certainly been progress in terms of broad-based black economic empowerment. And we are going to continue to track these figures. So just in terms of reflection from where we've come and the limited investment that we have had in infrastructure, it has resulted in us reaching some of our targets in terms of broad-based empowerment. So that was just the background as to where we've coming from. In terms of renewal, as I said, over the last 2 or 3 years, there has been this process of renewal. And the reason that I say that there's been renewal is that there are certainly a lot of initiatives that have been put in place to start this renewal process. One of the key things for us is the Zondo Commission and addressing this whole state capture issue and broad-based corruption, as we call it now, because it has been so widespread and it's so pervasive within most of our institutions. While the work of the Commission has been frustratingly and sometimes painfully slow, there's excellent work that is being done. And we're getting to the core of what some of those problems are. I think there was some excellent news last week in terms of some of the prosecutions that are going to take place. And obviously this ties in with CESA's core principles around ethics and integrity. And from a CESA perspective, we certainly support the work that the Commission is doing. We've got a zero tolerance approach to corruption. And we speak about this at all our forums that we address. And if any of our member firms are found to be involved in any of these things, we expect our clients, our other partners, to bring this to our attention so that we can address it. So in terms of the renewal process, this was one of the key initiatives to start to address the problem. I think another key initiative or development has been the Auditor General's office, the added powers that has been given to the Auditor General. Previously, some of the recommendations that the Auditor General put forward as part of the audit process they were recommendations, and a lot of our institutions didn't have to implement them. But now they have to implement the recommendations of the Auditor General's office. So we'll see in the next few years that our audit outcomes will start to improve, and we'll start to see better outcomes in terms of the money that is being spent. I mentioned the unintended consequences, and I believe that there needs to be this constant communication between our institutions, our state institutions, and the Auditor General's office on how do we interpret regulations, how do we as or how do our state institutions see it and implement it, and how does the Auditor General's office view that when they do the audit at the end of the financial year. So there needs to be this constant communication so that our officials do feel empowered, and that they don't get into the mode of deferring decisions because they are unsure and they want to be cautious with their decisions. So there needs to be this balance between empowerment of our officials and making decisions, and not being held accountable, not being held liable for doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. A couple of the other renewal processes, in terms of the Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate that sits in the presidency, there's and this is coming through in terms of the Infrastructure and Investment Office, which I'll speak about a little bit more just now. But there's a renewed focus about monitoring and evaluation, so that we can firstly monitor what's being implemented, and then the directorate needs to be playing a more proactive role in identifying challenges to implementations and foreseeing some of the problems that are coming before actually before they become a problem. In terms of state capacity, this is also one of the key things that I want to speak about a little bit more later. But just some of the developments that have happened, especially in the criminal justice sector, recapacitating some of the key institutions, like the NPA and the Hawks. Also in terms of our large infrastructure departments, public works and infrastructure, human settlements, water and sanitation, ESCOM. A lot of the political leadership at those institutions are in place now, and we need to follow through with getting the technical leadership at those institutions in place, so that they can make the decisions and they can be informed about what the correct infrastructure decisions need to be. And as I say, they need to be able to attract suitably qualified professional people into those institutions, whether it's chief financial officers, municipal managers, director generals, technical directors, with appropriate skills and experience to those key positions. And then I think there is a renewed focus on some of the successful programs that have worked in the past, such as the IPP program, such as the Sandrail concession programs. Those programs have worked, and there needs to be a renewed focus and attention given to those programs, so we continue to roll them out. I mentioned there in terms of the IPP program, it has been a very successful program, and it can be used to address some of the short-term electricity issues. And it will also bring on more projects into the industry that us as professionals and our contractors can start participating in. Okay, so I've reflected on what the problems were, some of the renewal processes that are in place, and now I want to talk about the bigger regeneration process that's in place. So it was very heartening when our president spoke, and he's spoken a few times now, and there's this whole renewed focus of infrastructure as being the catalyst that is going to start generating growth in the country. obviously from the state's perspective, they need to start looking at stabilizing debt first, but there's also needs to be continuous borrowing to start investing in infrastructure, and investing in economic infrastructure and social infrastructure. Economic infrastructure so that we can start looking at the multiplier effect of this infrastructure and bringing more participants into the economy. Infrastructure is going to be a catalyst for growth. I think as we start investing in infrastructure, it's also going to address some of the inequalities that I spoke about previously, and it's also one of the key drivers for creating employment opportunities. So we are very heartened to see that infrastructure is going to be front and center of this regeneration plan. I'm going to spend some time on a capable state, because we need to have the appropriate skills and resources sitting in the state to be able to help us to unblock this infrastructure spend and then to generate that project pipeline. So many of you would have seen the work that the Infrastructure and Investment Office has been doing. The CESA was concluded very successfully last week, the symposium, and the president also said there at the development symposium that he's looking at infrastructure as the flywheel of the economy. There was a lot of talk about projects that are now investment ready, that are almost at bankability. There's this focus on the network industries, water and sanitation, digital infrastructure, on electricity and power generation. And then there was this focus on agriculture, which is also very pleasing, and then also on human settlements. So I think the bigger picture is being painted in terms of how we're going to start regenerating, how we're going to start moving this economy forward. And one of the very heartening things is that there's this renewed focus on public-private partnerships. I don't mean it in the limited sense of PPPs, but just of inviting the private sector to be part of this process. And you would have seen at the symposium last week the likes of BUSA, of which CESA is a member. He was sitting at the table. The Black Business Council was there. All of the development banks, and we're going to see as this process starts unfolding. Once all the development banks start coming into the picture, we're going to find more and more private money coming into the picture. Because we've always heard this, that money is not the problem. We need investors want to see that their investments are going to be protected and that they're going to get some sort of return on those investments. With money market rates sitting at 2%, rates around the world sitting almost at 0%, infrastructure is going to be very, very attractive to invest in, so that they can get higher returns, rates of return on their investment. So for CESA, I think for entire industry, we are very heartened to see that infrastructure is going to be front and center of this regeneration process. So one of the key things that are going to drive this process forward is enabling a capable state. With all of our interaction that we've had with various government departments, thank you. There was just some feedback. With all of our key client government departments that we've spoken about, and even the president himself has said that the state is not at a stage where it can drive all of these developments and this infrastructure spend and build that's going to happen. Again, I want to say there are many pockets in different spheres of government that are doing this well already, but we need to get the entire state to be functioning at that same sort of level. And there are guidelines, and these guidelines have been around for a number of years now, on what the appropriate levels of skills need to be in government, and what the minimum requirements need to be, as I said, for a municipal manager, for a director general, for a technical director, for a chief financial officer, and all of our departments need to start bringing in those skills, those resources with the appropriate skills and experience to start filling in those positions. We also know that a lot of the skills now are sitting in the private sector. I've just shown you the graph there. This also comes from some of the stats that we've been tracking. We call it capacity utilization within our member firms. What's important for you to look at is the trend, the black line trend. And you can see it's been hovering around the 80% mark for a number of years now. And basically what that means is that in general, 1 in 5 engineers that are sitting in the private sector are not gainfully employed at the moment and are not being utilized to their full capacity. So one of the discussions that we are speaking to with the various levels of government is, how do we, as a short-term measure, how do we start utilizing some of that private sector capacity in the public sector to unlock some of this development that has been stagnating because there's not enough skill in the public sector to roll out projects and programs. So building a capable state is going to be a long-term project. To attract individuals back into the state is going to take 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even longer than that. We don't have the luxury of waiting until these skills are sitting in the state or have been attracted to the state before we start implementing our programs. We need to start implementing our programs now. And so the discussion is, how do we utilize some of that private sector capacity to unlock some of these projects? So, and through our discussions with public works and infrastructure, in some of the discussions where the president himself was sitting at the table, we've put forward some of these concepts. And these concepts, you will see that they are not new concepts. They have been utilized in industry for a long time, in the oil and gas sector, in the power sector. And we believe that it's appropriate that we use some of these concepts now whether it comes to the local government space, into municipalities, into provincial government departments. The owner's engineers concept, where you can appoint an owner's engineer as a municipality, and that capacity you can bring in from the private sector to act as your in-house capacity to roll out some of these projects. And then a separate an independent delivery team can be appointed to look at the actual delivery of some of these programs and projects. But once you bring in an owner's engineer, you have that appropriate level of oversight over what the delivery team is doing, that is reporting directly to the municipality to ensure that the municipality or that provincial department is getting what they're actually paying for. So this concept is not a new concept, and we believe that it can be effectively used in the short term to bring in some of the capacity back into the public sector. We've also said, and I've been so bold as to say, that as CESA, we are willing to volunteer some of our services to help to unlock some of these blockages that exist within the state. And I've been careful to say that we need to do this in a very structured framework so that we know what the actual deliverables are and what the timelines are. But what the offer is that if, for example, let me bring it down to a very basic level. If a municipality doesn't have even one engineer employed within the municipality, and there are a number of municipalities like this, if there's a municipality that is sitting with this problem, so they don't have they don't have a master plan, they don't have an engineer to guide them how to procure services, either of contractors or a consulting engineering practice or a quantity surveyor or an architect to put together a program for them. We are willing to go in and on a volunteer basis say, let us help you to structure a tender or procurement program to procure a team to develop a master plan for you, to procure a team to structure a panel for you so that you can bring in a panel of consulting engineers or a panel of contractors, and then you can use that to roll out your projects. And we are willing to do that to unblock some of these processes, because our view is that if, as I said, there's money that is not being spent, that has been allocated to a municipality, that you're not spending your budget, and then on the other hand, you're not delivering services to your communities, let us help you to do that. And we believe through this process, if we bring in volunteers, if you bring in owners, an owner's engineer, or if you second staff to municipalities, we can start to use that to build capacity within those municipalities, within those provincial departments. And around that, you can start now to attract more full-time employees that will be employed by the state and build capacity. And our role is, if we second senior engineers, is to monitor those younger engineers, help them to develop systems and processes in those municipalities so that they can continue with their programs into the future. And over time, either those seconded engineers can move out back into the private sector, or they might find that they are comfortable in that environment again and may want to stay. And that will help us also to, and if those engineers stay within the public sector, they will actually assist us in unrolling some of these projects. So this concept of the capable state, and for us getting to that position where we have that capacity, is one of the key things that we need to address, and we need to address now. I say the key thing is about implementation. And once we start implementation, confidence will start to grow, investment will start to come in, and we'll start to see growth. And then that will become a positive cycle, and the cycle will just continue. Another key things in terms of this whole regeneration process is the infrastructure and investment office, and through the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. I think this is a very, very welcome development. In spite of the lockdown, a lot of work has been done through the office. The head of that office, Dr. Ramakopa, is a civil engineer. He's been a mayor at the city of Tshwane before, so he understands exactly what the challenges are. We've had, through CESA, we've had numerous engagements with the office. And there's, as I said before, there's this willingness to engage with the private sector, with us as engineers, with finance institutions. So I think there's excellent work that's being done. And we heard last week that there's a number of these catalytic projects that have been identified. They are investment ready, and we hope that very soon they are going to hit the ground, and we're going to be turning the soil on some of these projects. And we're looking at these projects once they start rolling out, that is going to influence projects around them, municipalities around them. They are definitely going to be catalytic in nature, so that a lot of the other investment infrastructure programs are going to follow suit and going to be supporting those catalytic projects. One of the key things that the Minister Delil said, and at the symposium last week, that we need to debunk this myth about the lack of capacity. We know, as we sit in our consulting engineering firms, the amount of capacity that we have that's sitting in our firms. And we know that also that there's so many of our firms that are either closing down now, or that are reducing staff, that are retrenching people. So this lack of capacity is an absolute myth, and I'm glad that the minister said that we need to debunk this myth. Admittedly, there may be a lack of capacity in the public sector, but we've addressed how we can implement some measures in the short and medium and long term to try to address that capacity that's sitting within the public sector. But from a country point of view, we have the capacity that we need to start rolling out these projects and programs. Yeah. So also as part of this, Infrastructure and Investment Office, and through COGTA, you would have heard of the district development model. I think this is also a very, very welcome intervention. We know the challenges that are sitting at local government level, and we're looking now to support this program. We're starting to have engagement around, again, how do we bring in the private sector to assist with these programs. We know that a lot of these programs have been tried in the past and they've not yielded results. And our view is that there wasn't political buy-in at the local level to make this program work in the past. But now we have buy-in from the President's office, through the Minister's office, and all the way down to local government. And as long as we have that political buy-in, we believe that this model is going to work. Again, our call and through our engagement with the various levels of government is that we must start implementing. We have enough plans. We have, the will is there. We need to start implementing and implement on a wide scale. I mentioned briefly about implementation models, and there's so many of these models that have been implemented previously. They've worked successfully in the past. The IPP program, the SANRAL concessions, there's been the BOT, the DBOT. There are so many of these models that have worked. And we believe that the reason that they are not being implemented now is that there's not that capacity at municipalities, say, at provincial departments, that they're not perhaps aware of these implementation models. So we're stuck in the normal design and then go out to construction type of model. And there are a lot of other models that can work, and these can be replicated for, as I say, maintenance work, water, sanitation. A lot of these programs can be rolled out using different types of implementation models. And in fact, if you look at the symptom documentation that was put out previously, if you look at the CIDB documentation that has been around for a number of years, all of these models are spoken about. So we need to start using these models to fast track our implementation. I'm getting almost to the end now. I just wanted to mention also the Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think even our president now is speaking more and more about regional integration. A number of our member firms have been working in the rest of Africa for a number of years, and I think there's going to be more and more opportunities for us to work in the rest of the continent. South Africa is now the chair of the African Union. So we're expecting that this is going to be driven more and more, and for us as CESA, we want to try and support our export councils. And some of them are also sitting in the doldrums at the moment. So try to reinvigorate them so that we have opportunity to participate in some of these opportunities in the rest of the continent. Leighton also mentioned the CIDB and this long spoken about register of professional service providers. So we believe also, as part of the regeneration process, that we need to finalize this register for all professionals, PSPs, and we also believe that only PSPs that are registered with the CIDB should be able to contract with the state. At the moment, anybody can contract with the state. Anybody is an expert as a consulting engineer. Anybody can do this, and there's not enough checks and balances in place screen out and to make sure that only legitimate service providers can contract with the state. And we believe that if we put this register of PSPs in place, we will be able to screen out companies that are not actually suitable to undertake this work. We the nature of the register for us is critically important. It cannot be like a contractor's register. We don't believe that we need to have different gradings of consulting engineers, and it's because of the type of work that we do. It's intellectually based, and we don't believe that a limit can be placed on how we can provide those intellectual type services. So that discussion we need to continue to have with CIDB. And very importantly, the register must be able to cater for our smaller firms, startup firms. We don't want to exclude anybody, but we want to use this as a process to ensure greater levels of accountability, so that when the state contracts with a service provider, they know that that provider is legitimate and has been screened and does have the requisite experience and capability to provide infrastructure-related services. We continue to collaborate with EXA. You would have seen also that the fees committee has been reconstituted. We are part of that committee with a number of the other critical players in the industry, client bodies and all of that. Also a very, very welcome development, because I think this is going to assist buyers of professional services to gauge what an appropriate level of compensation is, or when a PSP provides services. Another critical part of the fee guidelines is the scope of services that accompanies that guideline. And I think a lot of the clients, smaller municipalities, they're not aware of what the services or the deliverables that a PSP actually needs to provide, or an engineer needs to provide. So I think when the scope of services is read with the guideline, the fee guideline, it gives a buyer of that professional services a very good understanding of what's supposed to be delivered and what an appropriate level of compensation is. And related to that, we've spoken about this for a long time, is we believe that professional services cannot be procured on a lowest cost basis, because it leaves very little room for innovation and for us as PSPs to deliver a comprehensive service. We are, and we state this categorically, that as CESA, we are committed to competitive sourcing of professional services. So we have no problem with that, but we're saying that it cannot be based on cost alone. So it must include issues of quality and functionality, and it must give us the opportunity to be able to be innovative in the services that we provide. As I note also that, and this can be brought into the evaluation system. The other imperatives that are absolutely key, such as broad-based empowerment, SMME development, making opportunities for smaller firms and things like that. And we believe that all of this can be brought into the system. Yeah, finally, I think, as I mentioned before, this whole COVID has thrown our lives and the way we do business into disarray, and we need to adapt to this new normal. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of companies that couldn't adapt because of the lockdown and not being able to participate in the economy. So as consulting engineering firms, we need to adapt to this new way of working. One of the challenges that we're finding already is in terms of interaction with our clients. We're not getting that opportunity for the face-to-face interaction that we were used to, so we need to make that work. I think there's a lot of challenges and new ways of thinking in terms of our own companies. how we deal with our employees, how we take care of them, making sure the lines between your work and professional life and your home life is becoming blurred. Many of us are working from home. We need to start rethinking about how we take care of our employees as well, create that work-life balance, and start thinking now in more in terms of an outcomes-based approach rather than an input time-based approach, which a lot of us were used to before. We all used to doing our timesheets, and in my own company, that's becoming less and less relevant. It's more outcomes-based, and the associated management effort that goes into managing how we deliver on our projects. There's this trust deficit that if you don't see somebody, you think that they're not actually working. Internally, we need to see how we empower our people, trust our people, and see how we make this new normal actually work. I don't want to speak too much about technology. From my point of view, all of the technology that we need is actually available. So we're actually in a good space that we have the technology to be able to cope with this new normal. And it's actually how to make this technology work, and also how we make this technology work around the people that we have, and not the other way around, not making the people work around the technology. So as I say, we are generally early adopters of technology. This technology has become second hand to us. But what we need to do, I think the state is probably a little bit slower in adopting this technology. But as we implement our projects, how do we try and transfer some of the technology through to the clients that we're working with? So it's not only about the road that we deliver at the end of the day, or the sewage treatment or water treatment works that we deliver. How do we build some of the technology in so that the client that is sitting in his office can still monitor what's happening on a sewage treatment works or things like that. So trying to build that into the technology and advising our clients of what's available and what can be done. So I've spoken a lot about the regeneration efforts that are underway, and from what I've said, I've tried to touch on some of the key things. There's a lot that I've mentioned, but we believe all of those things, if they start coming together, it's going to galvanize all of us into this whole regeneration effort. Some of the other initiatives that we are going to continue with as CESA, and it will continue to be part of our key strategic goals. Transformation is always going to be an issue, and I've shown some of the progress that we have made, and we're going to continue to encourage that and to help our membership with that process. We are continuing with our management development program for our young engineers, an excellent program that's been running for a number of years now. And so that is continuing. We've had to rework that program in light of the lockdown and the restrictions that has been done, and that program is going to continue. We're also continuing, we have a huge focus on our young professionals. So our leadership seminars, we're continuing with those. Those are also going to be held virtually. We've done them for the last 2 years, I think, and we're going to continue with those. And the management development program, the leaderships, especially the leadership seminars, we make that available to as wide an audience as possible. It's not limited to CESA member firms. So we try to get our clients involved in that, our contractors, any of our young professionals in the industry that want to participate are welcome to participate. We've created this graduate and retired professionals database. The minister actually mentioned this in a talk at the symposium last week. So, and again, it just speaks to this myth about not enough capacity being available in the industry. We have a number of retired professionals that want to give back, that want to still be involved, and they're available to participate. One of our number one priority as CESA is engagement with all our stakeholders, whether it's our client bodies, whether it's institutions like National Treasury, the Auditor General's office, whether it's our member firms themselves. This is our key priority, is to engage with all stakeholders so we understand each other. I've spoken quite a bit about that, and through all of these engagements that we have, we are sharing our ideas, things that we think that can work. And what has been very heartening is that we've had an audience with the president himself all the way through all the ministers, and we are seeing this renewed focus on engaging with the private sector, with the likes of CESA, and there's listening to each other and trying to make this thing work together. This was the SIDS roundtable last week. As I said, through BUSA, we were represented there, and we were very heartened with what's going on. Also, we're going to continue with our Excellence in Engineering Awards. Chris will give us some details about that a little later, but we are going to continue with that as well. So thank you everybody for listening. I've given you hopefully a lot to think about. From a CESA perspective, through this regeneration process, we certainly want to be part of the process. We want to contribute positively. We are trying to embrace the change. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's difficult to wrap our heads around everything that's happened and that is still happening. But we want to contribute positively to the discussions and to what's going to come. As I said, a key thing is about developing this capable state. People, irrespective of what systems, what processes you have in place, people are at the heartbeat of any organization. And we want to ensure that we have capable people, suitably experienced and qualified people sitting and making decisions, especially in our state institutions. I think this common vision is starting to emerge, and we want all of us to rally around this common vision. And this is the vision for our country. And we are very heartened that this vision now is going to be anchored in the National Development Plan and in infrastructure development. Our call is that we need to make SA one big construction site. I think that's where we're heading now, and we're welcoming that, and we want to be part of that process. So at CESA, we want to continue to be the apex organization that represents consulting engineers in the country, and we want all of our membership to be involved in this process and to continue engaging with us, so we can also engage with our clients with all levels of decision making, so that we can contribute to this regeneration and rebuilding process. Thank you very much.